Could your low carb diet actually be killing you? What's going on, you beautiful people? My name is Dr. Dan. I am a pharmacist turned weight management specialist. And today we're talking about low carb diets and what are the long term implications with these diets. But before we dive into that, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below so you don't miss another episode. And plus, I need you to help boost up my self esteem just a tad. It makes me feel better every time I see a little subscriber come and sign on. As well, check me out on my other channels at the official Dr. Dan. We are on the gram, we're on the tick, we're on the talk, we're on the book, we're on tweeting. I don't know. Anyways, we're getting lost here. And also check out my website, healthcareevolve.ca, where you can book a free consult with myself if you need some additional support. As well, you can sign up for my weekly newsletter. Now, I know that can be kind of a terrifying thought that low carb diets could potentially be harmful, considering how many people are using them and promoting a low carb keto style diet in order for weight loss. As well, doesn't this kind of fly in the face of all the information that the internet gurus are putting out there about all these special health benefits that keto and low carb diets potentially provide? I mean, it seems like they have X, Y, and Z health benefits, and hey, if you do it enough, you can probably start pooping out rainbow sherbet in the process. Well, I hate to burst your bubble, but low carb diets really offer nothing special in terms of weight loss, in terms of health benefits, and they certainly are not helping with any rainbow sherbet poops. They might only be causing some constipation for you. I know Craig, the IG influencer, has been lying to you. Nonetheless, you might actually like a low carb diet because maybe you have some sociopathic tendencies and don't like carbohydrates and stuff like that. Or perhaps you have a medical reason, such as celiac disease, where you need to actually avoid carbohydrates. And that is totally okay. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you might want to make sure that you are just taking the right approach. The reason being is that a study completed in 2019 by Mazziti and friends showed that low carb diets might actually be harmful in the long term. Now, these guys wanted to look at the long term effects because most nutrition research is really quite short lived. It's maybe 4, 8, 12 weeks, maybe 1 to 2 years of a study will actually get, but we have nothing really over the long term. And in those short term studies, things that we might assess might be things like, blood pressure, weight, lipids, blood sugar levels, that sort of thing, which are all great and fine and dandy and stuff. And we can certainly make inferences and kind of extrapolate the data to say, oh, this might be the outcome down the road. But we don't have the actual, cause and effect where, hey, you were on this diet and then it led to X event. And to determine if a certain dietary pattern is going to cause things like, death and heart attacks and that sort of thing, it's going to take a little bit more time. And this is especially true in nutrition research because, well, humans, we don't eat the exact same thing every day. It's not like you're taking the exact same drug, the exact same dose every single day. Your diet, in terms of your micro and macronutrient compositions, are going to change on a day to day basis. So it's not going to be this nice continuous effect. And these different compositions might affect a particular nutrient on a given day. So there's a lot of complexities and very hard things to look at. So it's going to be harder and it's going to require more time and work in order to tease out what might be the long term effects. Now, Mazziti and their pals focused on low carb diets in particular because when humans tend to go on low carb diets, what they end up doing is they remove the carbohydrates and then they replace the said carbohydrates with things like animal proteins and fats. Now, one would think that, well, what's the problem with this? The thing is that we have a pretty solid body of evidence that shows when we take and we increase the amount of animal proteins and fats that an individual is eating, we actually get an increased risk of death and heart disease. In fact, if we replace animal proteins with more plant based proteins, we can actually reduce your risk of heart disease, stroke, and death quite considerably. And the reason that this is the case is that animal fats and proteins tend to contain more saturated fats. And the reason that saturated fats are no bueno is that they can increase our LDL or our bad cholesterol, which can then ultimately clog our arteries. So, the specific objective of Mazziti and Friends' study was to actually understand and know if there's an association or a linkage between low carb diets and death or death from a specific cause. And to answer this question, they looked at a large sample of the US population, 25,000 individuals in total. On top of that, they also did what was called a meta analysis or systematic review. So they basically went through the literature and tried to pull all the other studies that had been done prior looking at low carb diets and the long term effects of them. They then did some magic and math and wishes and stuff like that and combined all those studies together to get the overall results of the literature. And what this ultimately does is this really adds to the robustness and kind of confirms whatever data they might have found with regards to their sample population that they pulled. And fortunately enough, these other studies that they pulled had been done elsewhere in the world. So that really increases the applicability. It's not just the US population, it is other populations across the globe. And so that really adds to the applicability of the results that they find ultimately to other populations and other parts of the world. I know, just like the earth is not flat, there is other people that live outside of good old America. Anywho, Mazades and friends found some very interesting results over the 10 plus years of data that they collected. First off, out of the 25,000 people that they looked at, approximately 3,400 of those people ultimately died over the 12-year period. That is nearly 15% of the population that they were looking at. And while this is sad, this is actually a good thing, particularly when we're trying to look at an outcome like death. We have a lot of data to work with. And what they found in this population is that the people that were following a low carb diet had a significantly increased risk of heart attacks, strokes, cancer, and death from any cause. And they also found similar results from their combined data set of all the other small little studies that they pulled together. So the big question is, can we believe this data? Is it really true? Has Craig, the IG influencer, really been leading us astray all this time? Well, like any good scientist, we are going to forever say that more research is really needed in order to finally conclude our results and blah, blah, blah. But this was overall a relatively well done study. Yes, this study did have some shortcomings. First off, being that it was an observational trial. Now, in nutrition research, that's not necessarily a bad thing as when compared to, say, drug trials and stuff like that. But observational trials are observing a group and then kind of popping in, asking them a few questions, and then you pop back out and just kind of continue to observe them and that sort of thing over a period of time. So, obviously, there's going to be some confounders and variables that we can't control for. This study also used 24-hour dietary recall questionnaires, which are quite notorious for being inaccurate depictions of what people actually eat and can cause some other variables and stuff like that. I mean, I can barely remember what I had for breakfast 2 hours ago, let alone what I ate over the last 24-hour period. Now, the other aspect that I want to bring up here that I'm sure some of the more intelligent Craigs back in the back will probably say and talk about is the carbohydrate content that the lowest low carb eaters were consuming, which in the data set that Mazady and friends collected was approximately 39% of their energy requirements. So 39% of their energy requirements or total calorie count for the day came from carbohydrates. Whereas, depending on your definition, but the traditional keto or low carb diet percentage or content percentage that should be carbohydrates is approximately less than 20%. So the Craigs in the back will boastfully say that, well, since the individuals in this study were not consuming a carbohydrate content that was less than 20%, they therefore negated any of the health benefits that would have come from a low carb keto diet. And in fact, the results that we found were because of a higher carbohydrate intake. So let's talk about this because on the surface, it looks like a valid point, even though the individuals that were consuming greater than 39% in terms of their carbohydrate intake didn't have any problems. But, whatever, Craig. The point that Craig is really missing here is that the amount of carbohydrates, whether low or high, might not actually have that big of an effect. It may actually be more the fact of what the carbohydrates are being replaced with in the diet. And I want to show you this little forest plot here. Do you see the little guy that's circled in red up there? And what you can see there is the little guy that's circled in red is actually left of the zero line. So it's left on the forest plot. And what that indicates is that those individuals from a low carb diet actually got a benefit from the low carb diet. Essentially, their low carb diet had a positive effect in terms of death and death from a specific cause. So what in the F was different about this study? Well, Nakamura et al. In 2014 looked at a specific cohort of individuals in Japan. And the individuals that were from Japan did consume a diet that had less than 20% of a carbohydrate composition. So maybe Craig was right? Not quite. You see, in the Nakamura study, what was actually happening is the participants were consuming considerably more plant-based proteins and a considerably lower amount of saturated fats. And they were also consuming more unsaturated fats compared to the traditional keto low carb diet that is full of animal based fats and proteins. Therefore, this data further strengthens the idea that it's not the high versus low carb argument that we got going on here. It's a matter of the dietary composition. And in fact, it's the amount of saturated fats that an individual is consuming that is ultimately going to increase their risk of things from like death and death from heart attacks and that sort of thing. So I'm sorry to the low carbers out there, but the bulletproof coffees, the side of bacon, and the extra stick of butter should probably go. That's if you want to reduce your risk of death and heart disease. But in reality, we really need to shut down this whole diet wars idea that we got going on here. It doesn't matter about the high carb, the low carb. Really, the best diet that's going to be for you is going to be the diet that you can sustain for the long term. And if you want to get some additional health benefits, I do recommend trying to eat more plant based proteins, trying to incorporate more fishes, more seed oils, more omega 3s, omega 6s, polyunsaturated, monounsaturated fats, all those wonderful and good things, and reduce your consumption of the animal proteins and fats that contain a lot of saturated fat. And no one is saying you can't do a low carb diet. Maybe you have to do it for medical reasons, or maybe again, you just dislike carbohydrates. The more power to you. Frickin' go for it. But focus on those same principles of having more plant based proteins, fish, and healthy oils and such. And in reality, I really take this as the fact that I can eat more sashimi, which if I honestly could afford it every single day, I definitely would consume it every single day. And hopefully all the healthy fats that I'm consuming would ultimately counteract the mercury poisoning, right? Anyways, that is all for today, you beautiful people. Let me know if you have any other questions or concerns. Drop them in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below so you don't miss another episode. And check me out on my other channels at the official Dr. Dan. We're on the Tick, the Talk, the Gram, the book, the tweet, you name it, we are out there. As well, check out my website, healthcareevolved.ca, where you can book a free consult with myself if you need some additional support. As well, you can sign up for my weekly newsletter where you'll get all the updates as to what I'm going on, what we got going on, what videos we got coming out, and that sort of thing. And until next time, people, always remember small tweaks lead to massive